dive into today's episode, I just want to remind you to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. Your support means the world to us. It helps us grow, reach more amazing learners like you, and keep bringing you fresh and fun content every week. So don't forget, like, subscribe, and let's keep this journey going strong. Hello, amazing language explorers, and a truly enthusiastic welcome back to another episode of Idiom Insights. I'm Emma, your dedicated guide through the twists and turns of English idiomatic expressions, always excited to uncover the fascinating stories and meanings behind these colorful phrases. So glad you could join us on this linguistic adventure today.
And I'm Jack, your co-host and enthusiastic word detective. I'm here to help you crack the code of English idioms, shine a light on their hidden meanings, and maybe even sprinkle in a terrible pun or two along the way. Consider me your friendly companion on the path to idiomatic fluency. It's always a genuine pleasure to be back here on Idiom Insights, learning together with all of you.
It really is a pleasure, Jack, to be back and ready to learn alongside our wonderful listeners. And today's episode of Idiom Insights is focused on some really evocative idioms that describe challenging situations, moments of failure, intense deadlines, and the everyday reality of managing finances. These are all phrases you'll hear very frequently in native English conversations across many different contexts, and understanding them will definitely give your English a significant boost and help you sound more natural and confident.
A very practical and, in some cases, perhaps slightly dramatic selection. These phrases cover moments where multiple problems collide, instances where things just don't work out, situations that are decided at the very last second, and the common struggle of paying the bills. And to give you a clear idea of what specific idioms we'll be dissecting, discussing, and illustrating in detail today on Idiom Insights, here are the 4 expressions we've lined up for you. We'll start with a perfect storm, which describes a situation where multiple bad circumstances happen at the same time, creating a much worse outcome. Then we'll look at what happens when something completely fails or breaks with bite the dust. Following that, we'll explore those tense moments where the outcome isn't decided until the very last possible second with down to the wire. And finally, we'll wrap up with make ends meet, talking about the challenge of earning just enough money to cover your basic living expenses.
That gives our listeners a clear and compelling preview of the idiomatic terrain we'll be covering together over the next little while. 4 very different but equally useful expressions that paint vivid pictures of common human experiences.
They certainly do. And before we dive headfirst into explaining that first idiom and really get into the nitty-gritty of its meaning and how it's used, we wanted to take a quick moment to connect with you, our fantastic audience. If you are finding these episodes of Idiom Insights genuinely helpful and enjoyable for your English learning journey, and if you appreciate the effort we put into creating them for you every time, please consider showing us your support by subscribing or following our podcast on whatever platform you are using right now.
Your subscription is a wonderful way to ensure you never miss a future episode packed with more useful idioms, clear explanations, and relatable examples that will help you improve your fluency and sound more like a native speaker. It also helps us reach more people around the world who are on a similar path of learning and mastering the nuances of English. And if you feel like going the extra mile and you have the option on your platform, leaving a like or a quick rating is also incredibly helpful and sincerely appreciated. It's a small but incredibly effective gesture that makes a big difference in helping others discover idiom insights and grow our lovely community of learners. Thank you so much in advance for your support. It genuinely means a lot to us.
All right, Emma, are you ready to face the combined forces of our first idiom?
I believe I am, Jack. Let's see what happens when everything goes wrong at once. Excellent. Our very first idiom for today on Idiom Insights, as we previewed, is a perfect storm.
A perfect storm. This idiom sounds quite dramatic, doesn't it? And it is. It describes a situation where several bad or negative circumstances happen at the same time, creating a single, much worse, and often unforeseen terrible outcome. It's when multiple negative factors combine to create a significantly more severe event or crisis than any single factor would have caused on its own.
That's a very precise explanation, Jack. The origin comes from meteorology, describing a rare weather event where a combination of several different weather conditions, which might be manageable individually, all come together at the same time in a particular location to create an extremely powerful and destructive storm. The most famous example that popularized the term was a real weather event in 1991 off the coast of North America, which was later the subject of a book and a movie called The Perfect Storm, where 3 different weather systems combined to create a monstrous and devastating storm.
Exactly. So, in everyday language, we use a perfect storm to describe any situation where multiple negative elements align simultaneously, leading to a really bad result. For example, imagine a small business owner. If they simultaneously lose their biggest customer, their rent suddenly increases significantly, and a key piece of equipment breaks down, all within a short period, that combination of negative events could be described as a perfect storm for their business. Any one of those problems alone would be difficult, but all 3 happening together at the same time creates a much more severe crisis that threatens the very existence of the business.
It really highlights the idea that the combination of factors is what makes the situation so bad, the synergy of negative events. It's not just bad luck, it's multiple bad things happening concurrently, each making the others worse, leading to a crisis. You might use it to describe challenges in a project. Our project was already facing delays due to unexpected technical issues. Then, the lead developer got sick, and the budget was suddenly cut. It was a perfect storm of problems that made finishing on time completely impossible.
The phrase definitely conveys a sense of being overwhelmed by multiple simultaneous difficulties. Each individual problem might have been manageable, but their combined effect is devastating or creates a major crisis. It's often used after the fact, looking back at a situation and identifying the multiple converging factors that led to its negative outcome. The company was already struggling financially, then the market crashed, and a major scandal involving their executives broke out. It was a perfect storm that led to their bankruptcy.
It perfectly captures the idea that the convergence of several negative elements creates a result much worse than the sum of its parts. It's a powerful way to describe a multifaceted crisis or disaster.
Let's hear how Mia and Mark use a perfect storm in their conversation. They're talking about a challenging situation they observed that became terrible due to several factors aligning.
Mark, did you hear about what happened with the launch of that new app the tech team was working on? The one they were so excited about?
Oh yeah, I heard it didn't go very well, but I didn't get all the details. What exactly happened?
Well, apparently they were already behind schedule because the software was much more complicated to build than they initially thought, so they were rushing right up to the deadline.
Okay, so they were late. That's bad but fixable, right?
That was just the start. Then, on the day of the launch, the server that hosts the app unexpectedly crashed right in the morning because of a power surge in the building, so nobody could actually download or use the app for hours.
Oh no, a server crash on launch day? That's terrible timing.
Exactly, and on top of that, the press release they sent out about the app contained a mistake about its main feature, giving people the wrong information about what it could actually do. So people who could download it were immediately confused and disappointed.
Wow, so they were late, the server crashed, and the announcement was wrong. That really sounds like a perfect storm of bad luck and problems all hitting at once for that team. No wonder the launch was a disaster.
It really was. Every possible thing seemed to go wrong simultaneously.
That's a vivid and clear example. Mia and Mark describe how multiple negative factors, being behind schedule, a server crash on launch day, and an error in the press release, all occurred at the same time, creating a perfect storm that led to the disastrous app launch. Their dialogue clearly outlines the multiple problems that converged.
It perfectly illustrates the idiom's meaning, a situation where several individual problems combine to create a much more severe crisis or failure than any single issue would have caused. The app launch was ruined because of that specific, unfortunate combination of events, that perfect storm of issues.
So listeners, have you ever experienced or witnessed a perfect storm of problems? Perhaps a time when multiple negative things happened at once, creating a major challenge? Share your sentences using a perfect storm in the comments section below this episode of Idiom Insights. Tell us about a time when everything seemed to go wrong simultaneously.
It's definitely an idiom that captures those difficult, overwhelming moments. All right, let's move on to our second idiom, which is about something failing completely. Our second idiom today on Idiom Insights is bite the dust.
Bite the dust. This idiom is quite dramatic and often implies a final failure, an end, or even death or destruction. It means that something has failed completely, stopped working entirely, been defeated, or ceased to exist.
That's a very clear summary, Emma. The origin of this idiom is quite visceral and comes from times of battle or combat. To bite the dust literally meant to fall defeated in battle, lying on the ground, perhaps dying, with your face in the dirt or dust. It was a literal image of being vanquished and defeated.
Exactly. So, in modern usage, while it can still sometimes refer to literal death, it's most commonly used metaphorically to describe something failing completely, ceasing to function, or being utterly defeated. A business that goes bankrupt and closes down can be said to have bitten the dust. A computer that completely breaks and cannot be fixed has bitten the dust.
It implies a definitive end, a point of failure from which there is no recovery. If you try a new method to solve a problem and it doesn't work at all, actually making things worse, you might say, well, that idea really bit the dust. We need to try something totally different.
It conveys a sense of finality about the failure. There's no coming back from it in its current form. An old car that finally breaks down beyond repair after years of service can be described as having bitten the dust. Its useful life is over.
It's a very common idiom in sports or competition to describe a team or a player being defeated. Our team played hard, but they just weren't good enough today. They bit the dust in the semifinals. They were defeated and eliminated from the competition.
The phrase is quite vivid and powerful, carrying that historical sense of defeat and falling down. It's a memorable way to describe complete failure or the end of something.
It really does emphasize that sense of final failure or cessation. When something bites the dust, it's usually over and done with.
Let's hear how Mia and Mark use "bite the dust" in their conversation. They're talking about a project that unfortunately did not succeed.
Hey Mark, remember that ambitious new project Dave and his team were working on for months? The one aimed at developing that super fast data analysis software?
Oh yeah, I remember hearing about that, Mia. It sounded really promising, and they put in so many hours working on it, didn't they? Everyone thought it was going to be a big success for the company.
Well, I just heard from someone on the inside that the whole project had to be officially canceled yesterday. Apparently, they ran into some fundamental technical issues they just couldn't overcome, and they ran out of funding and time to solve them.
Oh no, that's terrible news. After all that hard work and all the buzz around it, it sounds like the project completely bit the dust then? It's officially over and failed?
Yeah, unfortunately it seems so. All that effort, and in the end, the project just bit the dust. It's a real shame, actually. They were a great team working on it.
That's really disappointing to hear, especially when there were such high hopes for it.
That dialogue is a clear and effective use of the idiom. Mia and Mark are discussing a project that was canceled because it failed due to technical and funding issues. Mark uses "bit the dust" to mean the project completely failed and is now over.
It perfectly captures the sense of a definitive failure and end to something, in this case, the ambitious software project. After all the effort, the project sadly bit the dust, signifying its complete failure and termination.
So, listeners, what has recently bitten the dust in your experience? Perhaps an old appliance, a failed experiment, a discontinued product, or a plan that didn't work out at all. Share your sentences using "bite the dust" in the comments section below this episode of Idiom Insights. Tell us about something that failed completely or came to an end.
It's a memorable idiom for describing failure. All right, let's move on to our third idiom for today. This one is about tension and timing. Our third idiom on Idiom Insights is down to the wire.
Down to the wire. This idiom means that the outcome of a competition, a decision, a project, or any situation is not decided until the very last possible moment. It's a situation that remains tense and uncertain until the very end, often finishing extremely close to a deadline or with a very close result.
That's a very precise definition, Emma. The origin of this idiom comes from horse racing. In old-fashioned racetracks, a wire was stretched across the finish line at the end of the track. In a very close race, the horses would be running almost neck and neck, right until they reached that wire, making the winner uncertain until they crossed it. So, coming down to the wire meant the finish was incredibly close and decided only at the very end.
Exactly. In modern usage, it applies to any situation where the conclusion or result is uncertain and only determined at the last possible moment, often creating a lot of tension and excitement. A close election where the winner isn't known until the final votes are counted is decided down to the wire. A student finishing a big assignment just minutes before the deadline is taking it down to the wire.
It implies that there was no clear winner or obvious outcome until the very end, keeping everyone in suspense. A negotiation that continues right up until the contract needs to be signed is going down to the wire. The decision isn't made until the final moments.
It conveys a sense of urgency and a close finish. Whether it's a competition, a deadline, or a decision, the tension is high because the result is uncertain until the final moment. The championship basketball game was incredibly exciting. It was tied in the last second, and the winning point was scored right as the buzzer sounded. It really went down to the wire.
The idiom effectively captures that feeling of a close race or a last-minute rush. It's about the outcome being decided at the very limit of time or possibility.
Let's hear Mia and Mark use down to the wire in their conversation. They're talking about completing a task under a lot of time pressure.
Mark, are you finally finished with that huge report for the quarterly review meeting? The one that was due by 5 p.m. today?
Oh, Mia, yes, thank goodness. I literally just finished typing the last sentence and hit send to my manager about 2 minutes ago.
Seriously? Just 2 minutes before the deadline? I saw you were still working on it when I left for lunch. You looked incredibly stressed.
Stressed is an understatement. I was working on it all morning and all afternoon without a break. It was incredibly difficult to get all the data together and analyze it properly in time. I thought for sure I wasn't going to make it.
Wow, you really took it right down to the wire, didn't you? Cutting it that close must have been incredibly tense.
It absolutely was. My heart was racing as I was adding the final charts. It was a real challenge, but I managed to get it done right at the last minute. Whew!
That dialogue vividly demonstrates the idiom. Mark finished his important report just 2 minutes before the absolute deadline. Mia correctly observes that he took it right down to the wire, meaning he completed the task at the very last possible moment, highlighting the tension and the close finish against the deadline.
It perfectly captures the sense of completing something under extreme time pressure, with the outcome uncertain till the final moments. Finishing a report just 2 minutes before the deadline is a textbook example of taking something down to the wire.
So listeners, have you ever taken something down to the wire? Perhaps finishing a project, studying for an exam, or making a decision at the last possible moment? Share your sentences using down to the wire in the comments section below this episode of Idiom Insights. Tell us about a time you completed something just in time.
It's a great idiom for describing those tense, last-minute moments. And now for our fourth and final idiom for today's episode of Idiom Insights. This one is about personal finances and making ends meet. Our fourth and final idiom is make ends meet.
Make ends meet. This idiom means to earn just enough money to cover your basic living expenses, such as rent, food, bills, and transport, without having any money left over for savings or luxuries. It describes the financial struggle of having just enough income to survive and pay for the necessities.
That's a perfect explanation, Emma. The origin is related to balancing a budget. Imagine your income is listed at one end of a financial sheet, and your expenses are listed at the other end. To make ends meet means that your income is just enough to come together and cover all your expenses, so the two ends of your budget meet or touch, without a deficit, but also without much surplus.
Exactly. It highlights the challenge of living on a limited budget where every dollar is accounted for, and there isn't any extra money available. Someone who is struggling to make ends meet is likely living paycheck to paycheck, constantly worrying about having enough money to cover their essential bills and costs until their next income arrives. It's often used to describe a difficult financial situation, where a person or family is struggling to survive on a low income, or when unexpected expenses make it hard to cover everything. After losing his job, he had to take a lower-paying position, and now he's really struggling to make ends meet. He's constantly worried about paying the rent and buying groceries. It emphasizes the basic necessity of covering costs, implying there's nothing left over for non-essentials. If someone tells you they are finding it hard to make ends meet, you understand they are having difficulty paying for basic necessities like housing, food, and utilities.
The idiom effectively conveys that sense of financial constraint and the struggle to cover essential living costs with a limited income. It's a very common phrase used to describe everyday financial challenges faced by many people.
Let's hear how Mia and Mark use make ends meet in their conversation. They're talking about a friend who is facing financial difficulties.
Hey, Mark, have you spoken to Alex recently? I was chatting with her yesterday and she sounded a bit stressed about money.
Oh, really? I haven't talked to her in a week or two. What's going on? Is she having financial trouble at the moment?
Yeah, it sounds like she is. She said her part-time job hours were cut significantly last month, but all her bills, like rent and electricity, stayed the same, of course. She said she's working extra shifts whenever she can and selling some things online, but even with all that effort, she's still really struggling to make ends meet right now.
Oh dear, that sounds really tough for her. It's so difficult when your income suddenly drops, but your essential expenses don't change at all. She must be worrying constantly about having enough money for everything.
She is. Definitely. She said it's a real struggle just to make ends meet and cover all her basic living costs at the moment. There's certainly no money left over for anything extra, and she's worried about next month too if her hours don't increase.
Poor Alex. Hopefully her hours will go back up soon, so she can manage things a bit better.
That dialogue clearly illustrates the idiom. Mia explains that Alex's income has decreased while her essential expenses remain the same, and she is struggling to make ends meet. This means Alex is having difficulty earning just enough money to cover her basic living costs, and is likely worried about paying her bills and affording necessities.
It perfectly captures the meaning of the idiom, the financial struggle to cover basic expenses with a limited income. Mia and Mark's conversation highlights the stress and difficulty Alex is facing just to make ends meet in her current situation.
And that brings us to the end of our 4 idioms for today on Idiom Insights. We've explored the combination of negative factors, moments of complete failure, finishing right at the deadline, and the challenge of covering basic living costs.
We have certainly covered a lot of ground today, touching on some very real and common life experiences. In this episode of Idiom Insights, we learned that a combination of negative factors creating a crisis is a perfect storm. We discovered that something completely failing or coming to an end is to bite the dust. We explored the tension of something decided at the very last moment being down to the wire. And finally, we talked about struggling to earn enough money for basic expenses being trying to make ends meet.
These are all incredibly useful idioms that you will definitely encounter and can use to sound much more natural and fluent in English conversations across many different topics. Adding them to your vocabulary will significantly improve your understanding and your ability to express yourself effectively. So please don't hesitate to try practicing them. Write them down, say them aloud, or even try to use them in a simple sentence. Repetition and practice are the best way to master these phrases.
Absolutely. Consistent practice helps these idioms become a natural part of your everyday English. And if you enjoyed this episode of Idiom Insights and found it helpful for your English learning journey today, please remember to show us your support and help us reach more learners by giving us a like and considering leaving a quick rating on your podcast platform. Your positive feedback is incredibly motivating for us.
It truly is. And to make absolutely sure you don't miss out on any future episodes where we'll explore even more fascinating and useful English idioms, please be sure to subscribe or follow Idiom Insights wherever you are listening right now. Join our growing community of idiom enthusiasts.
Thank you so much for spending your time with us today and for being a part of the Idiom Insights audience. We genuinely appreciate your dedication to learning English and hope you found our episode both insightful and enjoyable.
It truly was a pleasure. Keep practicing, keep exploring the wonderful nuances of the English language, and we'll be back soon with more Idiom Insights.
Until next time, keep learning, keep smiling, and hopefully you're not finding it too hard to make ends meet. Bye, everyone.
Goodbye.